We're throwing it back. Welcome to a Monday Arvo edition of the NFL Brekkie Show. Laurie Horesh, Phil Murphy. Immediate reacts of a game that went final. Lost 20-odd minutes ago. The Bills' hoodoo continues against the Chiefs. And where we are in the NFL schedule, we had 4 games in the last, 30 hours? Less than that, 28 hours. 4 games in the last 27, 28 hours that have gone final. We have 3 games remaining, respective AFC, NFC Championship games, and Super Bowl 58 in Vegas. We know the champion is going to come from Kansas City, Baltimore, Detroit, San Francisco. Laz, it's our first chance to exhale and really dissect from which of those teams will the champion come and what lies ahead for some of the teams that had their season end in the last 27, 28 hours.
Look, a lot of talk about streaks this week, whether it was the Detroit Lions breaking a 3-decade-long hoodoo to get back to the NFC Championship game, Buffalo Bills, and we'll talk about that. Certainly history repeating itself there. The Kansas City Chiefs reaching yet another 6th consecutive AFC Championship game. But a streak that I'd like to talk about is the fact that divisional round of the NFL playoffs is unbeaten, is on an undefeated Goldberg-like streak of being the best 48 hours of football that you can watch at any point in time. Those 4 matchups.
Mate, it's less than 48. I mean, I was standing on a sideline, minus 11 Celsius, waiting for kickoff 30 hours ago in Baltimore.
Okay, so it's about 30 hours of action. It is the Bills and Chiefs, their storied rivalry, Mahomes, not just Mahomes, let's not be reductive and say it's Mahomes and Allen, but so much of those two franchises where they're trying to get to, where one has been and one has struggled to. And I know you've got some stats about the Bills and just what they've run over the past 5 years, or a certain amount of games has really placed them in history in terms of their achievement or lack thereof. But that just put an absolute full stop on a 4-pack that even the Ravens game, and I'm going to touch on the Ravens a bit, but even the Ravens game that looks like a blowout in the end with 3 scores separating it, it's 10-10 at the half, and we're seeing a schematic and talent challenge laid down by the upstart Texans that had everybody going, okay, divisional round has stepped up and delivered. Where wildcard weekend, as fun as it was, a lot of blowouts there, a lot of lopsided results, not a lot of tense end-to-end scenes, and we got more than that in what is the premier, as you mentioned, 30-hour window of NFL or football action, maybe even sporting action that you will find across the sporting calendar year.
Yeah. And Laz, the Bills-Chiefs game that just went final, Chiefs 27-24 winners, this was not the 13 seconds and overtime and all of that back and forward that we saw a couple of years ago in Kansas City. There was no scoring for the last 14 and a half minutes. None. No touchdowns, no field goals. Sorry, Buffalo. But it was just that tense environment because we knew what was at stake for these teams. So, Laz, we're going to get to first who impressed us, who stood out. And we had the list kind of curated prior to Chiefs Bills, knowing that it was very likely that we were going to hit on that game off the top. For me, just has to be addressed. All of the Chiefs' offensive critiques and criticisms that we had seen throughout much of the season seem to have been not resolved necessarily, but this is the Chiefs team that we were accustomed to seeing for the last 6 years. Each time that Patrick Mahomes has been starter, he has reached at least an AFC Championship game. I mean, even down to Travis Kelce getting his first multiple touchdown game since, the divisional round last year, that win over the Jags that ultimately was part of the Chiefs' Super Bowl run. This is the first time that Kansas City even scored on its first 3 drives of a game since week 7. This is an offense that had been anemic at times, and Laz, no drops. Not only no drops, but in the cold, making difficult catches, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, making difficult catches, Travis Kelce. And aside from a fumble on the goal line, this was pretty mistake-free football from the Chiefs. They had 8 plays of 20 or more yards. The Bills had 0. The Bills were fortunate to be in a position to be kicking a game-tying field goal here. Yeah, I said that. They needed dome. We'll get to that. We're going to look ahead for a lot of these teams that were just eliminated. The Bills, chief among them. Pun not intended there. But for the Chiefs, this is the team that looked like they had for the last 6 years. And if I'm the Ravens home in Baltimore, it's mixed emotions watching this. It's saying, okay, a team that Baltimore can run the ball very well. We know that. They have the 3rd most rushing yards in any playoff game in a franchise that has had some elite running backs, Jamal Lewis amongst them. I'm confident if I'm Baltimore, I can move the ball, but defensively, that top scoring defense is seeing a challenge across and then saying, oh, Patrick Mahomes, I don't know what's left in the tank of this current iteration of this Chiefs offense, but it seems it's more reflective of last year than it had been through, 19 weeks of this season.
I really enjoyed just playing Puppet Master there and dangling that take out there because I knew it was going to trigger you right off the bat in terms of a dome and the city of Buffalo. Look, for all the bouncing balls, you mentioned the touchback. The touchback that occurred, I'm leaving it out there just for a minute. The touchback that occurred with Mecole Hardman reaching out at the goal line and him losing control of the ball moving a strike from one of the Buffalo Bills safety, I believe it was Poyer, that delivered that hit. And just before his thigh or his buttock, whatever you want to go with there.
Whatever appendage.
His $$, hit the grass. That the fake punt from the Buffalo Bills, who thought they'd caught the Chiefs and 10 men on the field, the man short, and it suspected that was a bit of an audible on the field to go for the fake punt. That doesn't work. But honestly, you mentioned the fumbling ball on the ground that looks like it could have just been a big, just get your body on top, dive on top of the football from the Chiefs. They go for the scoop and score, and it somehow retains. The possession is retained by the Buffalo Bills. But yet, the most bizarre coin flip, ball security moments that happened in this game were Marcus Valdes-Scantling hauling in a couple of tough contested balls down the field, some huge conversions there. I think this was, when it comes to the Chiefs, and did we see the Chiefs of old? I think we saw enough of the Chiefs of old. Was it downfield galore and, Tyreek Hill streaking away for 75-yard touchdowns untouched? No, no. But it's what we asked. It wasn't an overly fed Rashee Rice game. He had his moments, got a little beat up in this game, but he had a few key grabs there. But Travis Kelce getting involved early, a few downfield catches. We saw the red zone chemistry was back there with Patrick Mahomes, who did sail a couple of throws early. It wasn't all smooth sailing, but this was more of the same. I think they've done overall in the past couple of weeks. Beneath this, we spend so much time talking about the receivers and the skill position. How's the running game going? But just the second straight week, we're talking about the playoffs. They've only played 2 playoff games so far. Patrick Mahomes, 0 sacks. We're seeing better protection. It's not all clean all the time and not trying to portray it as just he's sitting back there with all the time in the world like Jared Goff felt like he was for moments today for the Lions. But they're keeping him cleaner. And with what was going on at the tackle spots through with health and form this year, that's a big variable. It seems to be tilting back towards the Chiefs' way, Andy Reid's way, Patrick Mahomes' way. Okay, big statement for me. Moving on from that game, the Baltimore Ravens, I mentioned it. The second half showing from them was them putting on an absolute showcase as to why we are the most dominant team in football. There were the MVP tier drives from Lamar Jackson from the run game. He did it on the ground. He's bringing up the century and a couple of touchdowns on the ground. He's making extra plays with his pocket mobility, not just escaping. They move the pocket for him sometimes. Sometimes it's just his rare athleticism, his downfield eyes, and his ability to sense contact and pressure within the pocket to escape or to step up to provide those extra seconds. There were shoulder shakes and pump fakes to move safeties. Those late game drives to stretch this to a 2-possession game, to a 3-possession game, were every bit the MVP performance. And from the defensive side, again, you can box score scout and go, hey, they didn't even, the Baltimore Ravens didn't even get him to the ground, didn't get CJ Stroud to the ground and create sacks. No, but 45% of the time, they had a pressure rate of 45.7%, I should say. Really get the decimals in there, which means that whether it was the exotic blitzes, the creative blitzes we see from Mike McDonald, whether it was just 4-man pressures, they were getting after him. They were moving him off the spot. And for CJ Stroud, so many of these beautiful moments of his rookie season that we've seen is his pocket mobility, his subtle movements, his shoulder shakes, his grace. We use the word grace, calm, poise in the pocket under pressure, keeping those eyes downfield. What the Baltimore Ravens do when they get after you, whether it's 4 men on the blitz, 5 men, 6, 7, whatever, they blitz like a school of fish. If someone ducks inside and pulls an inside move, if someone counters, there's a perfectly balanced Baltimore rusher moving to the outside. Their gap and lane integrity, which is not providing, to really break it down, not providing escape hatches for someone like CJ Stroud to step up or run out of. The fact that they maintain those gaps so well, that gap integrity as they get up the field and harass and harangue the young quarterback from the Texans, stands out above anybody else. We've seen teams this season. We've seen CJ Stroud come under fire, have blitzes sent his way, have pressure sent his way, and him constantly be able to find routes away from that. Have a look, even talk about a different young quarterback. Have a look what the Cowboys did trying to create pressure on Jordan Love last week. And Love always, so often the time, was able to find room to step up, step out,
Love
move
finds
to the
a way.
side, create. Love finds a way. There was no way. There was honestly no way. This was dominant. It was clever. It was high football IQ. It was great talent. It was the total package, especially in that second half. I mean, CJ Stroud has been one of the stories of this season. That offense, despite middling, up and down, different pieces in and out for the offensive line, Devin Singletary being the lead back, they've been one of the stories of this season. On the second half, the story was 234 yards for the Baltimore Ravens and 68 in the second half for the Houston Texans. That, my friend, is dominant, and that is a statement.
Laz, and it sets up a really interesting pre-snap chess match, because so much of what you're talking about that Baltimore does, they do, but they also disguise it pre-snap with how they move around the back half of that defense, and really they'll show man looks and really be in a cover 3, or they'll be willing to drop a defensive lineman into a passing lane, and it takes a half beat to figure it out if you don't get it pre-snap. And to CJ Stroud's credit, remember, he started the season with that long run of 191 pass attempts without a pick. He ended the season 198 without a pick. He didn't make a costly mistake, but you mentioned the pressure rate, second highest of his. In 20 days, he's going to win Offensive Rookie of the Year, full stop. So when he gets that award, this is the second most frequently he was pressured in any game during his rookie season. And in this game, went just 5 from 15 when feeling that pressure. Houston had 2 games all year in which they did not score an offensive touchdown. Remember, their touchdown yesterday was on special teams, a punt return in the second quarter. 2 games all year without an offensive touchdown. Week 1 in Baltimore and week last against Baltimore. So it is this defense that is playing on another level. We're not even talking about the MVP-elect Lamar Jackson, though we can, but that school of fish analogy is so apropos. The Ravens bring 5 or more rushers at the fifth lowest rate in the NFL. When they bring 4, allow the fewest yards per dropback, 4.9 heading into that divisional round game. I haven't gotten the updated numbers yet, but that was one of my pre-game stats in that game. So you have a team that when they drop 7, they allow the fewest yards per dropback in the NFL. That is a terrifying combination with the most valuable player to be for the second time, Lamar Jackson, who played a very mature game, did exactly – that was the one game that wasn't competitive in the final moments, was the Ravens at home just housing the Texans. And thank goodness, because it was freezing on that sideline. I didn't need to extend my time there any further. But that's why this team, Laws, I mean, look at their 4 losses. Week 18, dead rubber against the Steelers, Lamar Jackson sits. And then 3 losses in the regular season. Every one of them, they had a minimum of an 88% chance to win, according to ESPN's Football Power Index, in the final 2 minutes. And, cover 0 against Pittsburgh the first time. Like, that's the kind of stuff that happened, just mistakes.
The drops in that Pittsburgh Steelers game. The drops in that game were...
They led in the final 2 minutes of every game of their first 16 games. And the one they didn't, again, they were resting starters for this playoff run. So they are deservedly getting our praise today. And they will be favorites against Kansas City, and they'll be favorites the week after.
Benny G with a little tongue-in-cheek. Steelers just too
Mike
good.
Tomlin, man, I said the guy makes a mean chicken salad with those ingredients. But Laz, for me, I want to talk about what impressed me most this weekend, and it's not that Baltimore didn't. Just watching how that Lions game played out, you started to get those uh-oh feelings. Jared Goff last week, 22 for 22 passing when not pressured by the Rams. So the Bucs, who beat the Eagles by blitzing relentlessly, said, bet, we're bringing the house too. And in the first 3 quarters, Jared Goff, against pressure, 6 for 14 passing, just 58 yards, 4.1 yards per attempt. The adjustments they made in that fourth quarter when blitzed, Goff, who faced more frequent pressure in this game than any game except for the 2 against the Vikings, who led the NFL in blitz rate, fourth quarter, that yards per attempt goes up from 4.1 to 10.6. When pressured in the fourth quarter, Goff was 6 for 7, 74 yards, and the touchdown that proved decisive. He was 11 for 12 passing overall. if not for the final attempt falling incomplete, he had 131 pass yards. He would have had the highest completion percentage in a fourth quarter of any quarterback ever, full stop. I'm not going to make you relive the guy who currently holds the record at 9 for 9. Goff was 11 for 11. But that the Lions' ability in a game that it seemed like the Bucs were starting to build some momentum to put the game away. Baker Mayfield, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. Yet again, Mike Evans could not be stopped on deep balls. The Lions have some questions to answer defensively, aside from Aiden Hutchinson, who was magnificent. The Lions have some questions to answer defensively, but offensively, Jared Goff, who's kind of was sent there as an afterthought, the elder statesman of the divisional round at age 29, he showed that he is reaching his quarterbacking prime and played his best football at the absolute perfect moment, and gives Lions faithful something to celebrate today. I know they're not even worried about San Francisco, a first conference championship game birth since 1991, but Jared Goff was the one who closed that game out. So credit to him, a guy who was, again, an afterthought once he left LA.
The drive that ended in the Amon-Ra St. Brown touchdown at the corner of the end zone, on the side of the end zone there, was Jared Goff at his absolute best. One, it was, take a bow, the entire Lions operation there. Take a bow at Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator, the offensive line, surrounding talent. But you saw key situational runs there. You saw picking up some big first downs. But there was classic Jared Goff standing in the pocket with time and ripping those balls over the middle of those chunk plays that we've seen him on, those in-breakers, those inside routes, picking apart zone looks. There was that, which we expect when Jared Goff is firing. There's also some phenomenal touch passes to the sideline. He was working every single bit of the field. In this game, we even saw Jared Goff show off a little legs at time, which, that was, whoa, we're really feeling ourselves now.
Jared. 8 yards, got down, slid, beautiful.
Now, not for the first time in a football movie, but now Ryan Gosling is really getting ready for the biopic, really getting ready for that casting role there. But this was just, honestly, it was the biggest statement performance from Jared Goff that possibly we've seen in his entire career. I know he reached a Super Bowl, but as they reached that Super Bowl against the New England Patriots, Jared Goff, particularly in that Super Bowl, but there had been some issues. We'd started to see some humbling moments on the horizon for that iteration of the LA Rams. What we're seeing now, though, this is back to the best form we've seen him in. And he has proven that last year, the limited turnovers that people said, including me, questioned whether he could continue to play football and limit the turnovers to that degree while maintaining downfield aggressiveness and productivity. He has taken that on to a whole another level here. So a credit to the Lions. Look, it's 1991. They were last in a conference championship game, appearing in the NFC conference title game. And that type of weight, and look, there's some other weights around the league that are going to continue going on, but that type of hoodoo that's being broken, it's phenomenal to see for this franchise that has faced so much pain, so much curse in the Super Bowl era. And look, they went up. Yes, the draw favored them a little bit. Tampa Bay Buccaneers were not the strongest possible opponent they could have found themselves going up against, but it was a tough opponent. There were some matchups that were never going to be very easy. You think about Mike Evans against any one of those defensive backs, and they weathered a storm. They weathered moments where the offense stalls out, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers find the ability to score rapidly and quickly and put pressure on the scoreboard. So, look, a lot of credit to Jared Goff. Benny G says, Lions to win the Super Bowl, and the karma circle from the Stafford trade is completed. But I think that, look, when we're looking at what these final four teams, the Ravens, which is the Ravens narrative is definitely about proving people wrong, proving that they are a playoff team, particularly Lamar Jackson, and they can take this fantastic and often heralded football operation roster that's being built, and the head coach that is very much respected, revered around the league, and a presumptive two-time MVP. They can turn that into playoff success. The Chiefs, it was proving that the dynasty wasn't over. They hadn't made a glaring error not adding to the wide receiver stock, and they did still have the ability to go the distance. The 49ers, we're going to finally get over the hump. We've been here, we've been in this conversation, and we have failed to deliver in the biggest moments. And then the Detroit Lions, this is the Cinderella story. This is the heartfelt narrative, and they're taking this to the next level. All right, Phil, those are our big...
Just quickly, I think we can succinctly say that in the AFC, it is the touchstone of postseason success for the last half decade. In the Chiefs, against the team that has kind of been the opposite of that. Famously, this is their first time hosting an AFC Championship game. When they were the 1 seed prior, they crumbled. And Lamar Jackson, he put up big numbers in that game late, some stat padding, but largely in his playoff career, he has underperformed. So you have Mahomes against Jackson, who has he really shaken the hoodoo, or did they just get the youngest, opponent that they could draw at this side in the Texans and get it done? You have those two. And then on the NFC side, it's even more of a historically based argument. The most playoff wins ever, the 49ers, against a team with the fewest in the Super Bowl era, the Lions, who even with their 2 wins in the last 2 weeks have brought their franchise Super Bowl era total to 3. So a lot of opposite ends meeting in our final 4 with, again, 3 games remaining all season.
Those are the big impressions that we took away. Those are the ones off the dome, off the top, that really do come to mind from what we've seen. Now we turn towards the people. Now we open up the Hot Take Hotline, brought to you by McDonald's. And I'm going with an audible here off the bat because the comment section is firing, and we love that. Please send your comments in, send your hot takes in. We've got time today to dive into some of these. Brian off the top, Horesh is the greatest NHL personality, Australian NHL personality ever. This was later, followed up by Pure Genius, followed up by Wonder if the NHL was a crack at him, followed by lol typo. Eventually getting back to Horesh is the greatest Australian NFL personality ever, period. We really circled there. I will say, if we want to talk power rankings of the Mighty Ducks characters as on-air talent, the hockey players as on-field talent, not on-air talent, on-field talent. If that's what we want to look at, I do have a decisive top 10. It's probably the only power rankings of Mighty Ducks players where you're going to see Charlie Conroy referred to as Kellen Moore. Typically, it does have one Adam Banks in the 1 slot, but I think who falls in the number 2 slot may surprise some people. That's about all I've got for you from hockey analysis. Now let's remove the ego trip from on screen. I could see you. What did you say there? Sorry, Phil. Who'd you suggest?
Can't be Goldberg, can it?
No, Goldberg's further down. It would be Connie Moreau, who was absolutely phenomenal. Just the assists, the goal scoring ability. She can do everything.
I didn't see a knuckle puck, tangent coming in this edition of the Brekkie show, but here we are.
But nonetheless, I'm going to take the ego trip off screen because I could literally see Phil wincing as it was coming. We've got, Benny G, we see your multiple thoughts on the Buffalo Bills, and we are going to get to them.
He's got some thoughts.
He's got some thoughts. Let's go to the rundown first from Reed. He says the 3 best teams in the league are all in the AFC. Next week's game in Baltimore is the real Super Bowl. Presumptively, he's talking about the Chiefs, the Bills, and the Baltimore Ravens. No shots fired there at the Texans, but presumptively that's who he's talking about. Phil, 1, is it true? And 2, do we think that matchup next week between the Chiefs and the Bills Chiefs and the Ravens will produce the Super Bowl, a hardened Super Bowl champion? Or is it too much battle hardening through this quarterback gauntlet of the AFC? And does it actually set up for perhaps the 49ers to run through against an opponent that is feeling the wear and tear of what was always going to be a dominant AFC versus NFC schedule and lineup in the 2023 season?
Yeah, it just feels more than anything, if we're talking about chicken nuggets, the guys who search for golden nuggets are getting a little disrespect, Laz. It's kind of a spicy nugget for me there. I think this Packers team that pushed the 49ers to the brink in the rain in Santa Clara is far stronger than they've gotten credit for in the last 9 weeks. The level at which they're playing reminds me of the Lions last year. So if I'm here making a tip for next season's NFC North, I'm back in the pack, man. Jordan Love, 21 touchdowns to 1 interception in the 9 weeks heading into this game. He was picked off twice, both by Dre Greenlaw, both in the final 4 drives. The 49ers made some great in-game adjustments. The Packers were having a lot of success throwing toward the sideline. Love had been magnificent against the blitz. Niners dial back the blitz, try and funnel the offense to the middle of the field. Had loads of success, forced Jordan Love to a career low. I know it's not a long career, but a career low, 2.1 yards per attempt on passes between the numbers. So the 49ers come out of a game in which they only win by 3, and it's okay. It's a foregone conclusion. The winner of Chiefs Ravens, or even had the Bills won at the time of the take, that team's going to come out and beat presumably the 49ers or the Lions. I still have the 49ers as the two teams capable of beating the Chiefs, or excuse me, beating the Ravens. The Chiefs can certainly next week if their offense performs at the level it did and their run defense through the spine of the defense is stronger. They can beat the Ravens. But the 49ers learned a lot on Christmas night at home. They lost that game. They lost it handily. There's a reason that Lamar Jackson is now 19-1 in his career against NFC opponents. He is tough to stop the first time through. You kind of need that second crack at him. I'm not ready to, even though I'm wearing a Ravens shirt, I'm not ready to say the 49ers are a fourth best team remaining in these playoffs. And I'm certainly not ready to say they don't have the opportunity to win a Super Bowl in Vegas in 3 weeks' time.
Benny G asking, don't you think that Detroit run defense can stop Lamar, Phil?
Nope.
And also offering up, hey, that Packers team also lost to my Steelers. I mean, Benny's, between the Steelers and the Bills, we're getting some very insightful thoughts and takes, and he is on the right spice meter. Phil, I will also say a bit of local feedback. I have not just from the chat. The audience, the love, the family for the NFL Brekkie Show extends even beyond the chat. I'm getting straight up text messages saying, nuggets. Big appreciative nod to you, Phil, for the reference there. You've got people eating. You've got people wanting to go out and get McDonald's chicken nuggets right now, get some McNuggets going. You are delivering on the brief and you're speaking.
It is the Monday Arvo show now. So normally we talk about Brekkie. We got the Egg McMuffins and things like that. This is the appropriate time to go out and get yourself a 6, 8, or 12 if you're keen. Pack of nuggets. Some barbecue sauce, perhaps.
Oh, you know what I don't mind? I don't mind getting a little Big Mac sauce on the side for a little dipping. Yeah, there we go. Now we're thinking. Anyway, this is the Hot Take Hotline brought to you by Macca's, not just the Nugget chat. We'll get to Buffalo in a sec. I want to get to this one came from Guy, and this one, like the heat was turned up. This is a spicy treatment we were getting this week. Guy says Aaron Jones cost the Green Bay Packers that game. He could have scored on his long run, but he cut it back. Look, I have gone.
You watched it. You tell us.
I've gone back and watched. I've looked at the different angles. I've looked at the pursuit. I looked at the DBs he was running at or alongside. Looked at Fred Warner screaming down from Aaron Jones' left. Would have been more the top of the screen if you're watching the broadcast angle. You saw the support that was there on the right side. I didn't see when he initially cuts back. If he had run behind a blocker there was still more support coming on that kind of, I guess, top or left side of the screen, depending which angle you're looking at there. Left as Aaron Jones was running, there was still support there. I didn't see an ability for Aaron Jones to make it there. I will say Aaron Jones, big run, did help him on his way to getting one of my props over the line. So salute to you, Aaron Jones. Yes, over a buck on the ground for Aaron Jones. A lot of positives there. Benny G, he would have scored 4 years ago when he was faster. I think there's a lot of stray heat going towards.
Right. A running back did cost the Packers that game. The Big Mac, C-Mac, Christian McCaffrey was the running back that cost the Packers that game. 5th time this season. Triple-digit scrimmage yards and 2 scores. 17 carries, 98 yards, 2 touchdowns. 5 playoff games now, touchdown in all 5 of them. So he was the reason that the Packers are not playing anymore. That and Brock Purdy on the final drive. He was 6 for 7. The only incomplete pass was a Kittle drop.
So Brock Purdy, who I was happily walking around the ESPN Australia office today. I'm not actually in Moe's Taverns, just the room I'm in here. Sorry to ruin the illusion.
Springfield, New South Wales.
Look, I'm being careful here, but I will say, wouldn't surprise me if a few Buffalo Bills fans around Moe's Tavern tonight after another wide ride, almost 33 years to the day. But I was talking out there and look, Brock Purdy is a walking studio show segment at this point. Missed throws, would-be interceptions, and yet comes up with just, many times put it, just an absolute nails drive to win this thing at the end. Whatever you thought of Josh Allen of Brock Purdy before the game, you feel afterwards. You either feel he's lucky and he's a product of surrounding circumstances and he should have been picked off twice, or you think that people are absolutely putting dirt on his name that is undeserved. And he showed the big game, legacy 49ers mentality with his own drive.
leads the NFL in completion percentage when pressured, second in QBR when pressured, second in yards per attempt when pressured, 10-yard rush. No Deebo Samuel on that drive.
I have a crazy take, Phil. I have a crazy take. Maybe, just maybe, singular NFL games are not a referendum on whether your quarterback is definitively the guy or not one of the guys.
What does this game do for Dak Prescott's legacy? Question mark. Put it on the topic bar like the one we have and have it any show with this two-head format. That's what we do.
What a look
impact of today for legacy.
All right, moving on through the hot take hotline. I mean, John, in response to the experience that was Jason Kelce, pre-game you sent me the clip.
What's the hot take here?
There is no hot take here. This is
man took a shot out of a bowling ball with Bill's Mafia.
He got in with Bill's Mafia without his shirt on, outside the box to drink beers like prime peak Stone Cold Steve Austin. Yeah. The flexing after he saw his brother have a massively rejuvenated performance on his 2 touchdown day. What we saw from Jason Kelce, and I put it out there, so I'm not trying to recycle lines, but to me, this was the perfect embodiment of a dad who's away from the 3 kids for the weekend. This was exactly how you feel, given the opportunity. Just feeling every single bit of it. I can say that one of our commenters here also sent me a direct message saying to be Jason Kelce for the next 3 to 6 months of whatever his journey is, potentially retirement, as he enjoys what will be, you'll be eventually moving into summer over there. It goes winter, spring, summer over there, right, Phil? That's how this thing works over.
So Connecticut, you get winter, and then you get the pump fake for spring, and then you go back to winter. We're still in first winter so we have about 10 centimeters of snow outside, but it hasn't been above freezing in like 9 days. And we have a full moon, or we got one coming up. So if you look outside, it literally looks like a black and white movie. You have moonlight on the snow, and it feels like I've gone back in time. And I think that's actually how the seasons go. They actually go backwards. You get a taste of spring, and then you rewind and relive the winter you didn't finish.
Have you told our good friend Kane Pittman that that's what he's got in store for himself in the next few months?
Kane, God bless him. God bless him. He's scraping ice off his car without gloves. You guys sent him here from Melbourne completely ill-prepared. For somebody who used to call Milwaukee home, it's pretty embarrassing.
We love Kane Pittman. You follow Kane not just on ESPN on TV, on ESPN.com.au. Follow him on socials. One of the great basketball voices the nation of Australia has ever produced. He'll love hearing that because it's far less kind of what I say to him in the group chat. Moving on, though, we're really, look, let's just say this. Look, people know where my heart lies in football, and that is in Dallas. But Jason Kelce transcends fandom. Yes, he is an absolute one of the lasting images of the talk about drought breaking, the Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl run, the Super Bowl victory, the image of him, what he adorned that day in front of the Philadelphia Eagles fans, obviously will last for history. But he is a global treasure. And what we saw from him was, yes, John, it's not even a hot take. It's just an accurate take that was peak male performance, certainly peak dad performance on the road. All right, now, Benny, let's get to the Buffalo Bills, because I know you had some thoughts here. Started with morning champions. Why can't Diggs do what he's paid to do and catch the damn ball?
Okay. Yeah. That
Buffalo building a dome next year after the Bass miss. Wide right.
It's not the Bass miss that needs him building a dome. It's the fact that they have a quarterback with the arm that he has, and you're going to go and make it the great equalizer. You're playing January home games in snow.
And then we have 21 yards from your wide receiver one, Stephon Diggs, I really hope questions are asked of him.
Well, and Laz, rewind. He hasn't scored a touchdown, has Diggs, since November. The loss to the Eagles, I believe, was his last touchdown for Diggs. And that means and since then, he's gone over 60 yards one time. Though he should have gotten targeted on the short pass to Khalil Shakir. Josh Allen had visions and flashbacks of the Gabe Davis touchdown in this matchup of yesteryear. And then his plant foot got hit as he threw that pass, came up short. But if he checks that down to Diggs, that's a catch and run for 15 to 20.
Prior to today, against the Steelers, he had 7 for 52. And in that final regular season, the Week 18 victory over the Dolphins, 7 for 87.
That was the one time he went over 60 since November. It's like 6 games, 7
and
games.
it's not just the yardage, it's also just the reception capital in general, because that 7 reception performance on the 8th of January against the Dolphins, he hadn't had 7 receptions in a game since before Halloween.
Jeez.
That's how long it had been. So it's the yardage, okay, whether you want to beef that up with some chunk plays, which haven't been there as much either. But it's also, when you're looking at receptions, it's also, think about the situational value that you're not getting from him, where he has been so effective on key downs and distances in the past. But the final hot take that Benny does sum up here, my hot take is Diggs needs to be traded. Him and Allen haven't looked like combining on the same wavelength all year. Let's just get into the reality of that for a sec, because I do have the Buffalo Bills, and we're going to get into some future projections, and this is actually a nice way to parlay our way into it, Phil. The Buffalo Bills are currently slated.
Well, it's a segue, but Laz wants to say parlay because he's been on a heater in our prop.
It is a segue. It is a segue. Parlay would be asking, either talking about multis, or parlay would be asking for a little truce for a minute. Look, per over the cap, they're over $43 million over the cap for 2024.
Yeah.
Now, there's obviously a big restructure that you can do with Josh Allen. You can probably create about $20 million of space from that.
Which they did last year, did they not? They restructured $23 million for this year.
And it's a question of whether they want to get into any sort of you're not going to rebuild, but retool on the fly, or whether they want to push chips into the middle again. Stephon Diggs, whilst if you did a traditional cut, you're looking at $31 million of dead money and not even savings. You're paying it. If you are doing a trade beforehand, again, it's very costly. You're taking on that $31 million, and it's not actually creating space. The move would be, if you really wanted to get out of it and you're looking at a post-June 1 cut per over the cap, dead money for this current season is just shy of $9 million, and you're creating $20 million in space. So you're almost getting underneath, but you don't get those savings till June 1 hits. You look at Von Miller as a conversation as well. There are a number of veterans that are coming into free agency for this team. Their list of, and Adam Schefter always does a great job tweeting those out and sharing those. Some of the impending free agents, but Taylor Rapp, who came in and helped out with the multiple safety looks that they like to operate. Gabriel Davis, Shaq Lawson, long time being there. Latavius Murray, who came in. You look at Dane Jackson, Jordan Phillips up front. Trent Sherfield has had, these are less than AJ Epinesa has had some moments. We've seen Ty Johnson spelling in the running back room behind James Cook and having some snaps and some key snaps, I think, situationally, where his power has added a nice element. But that's what you're looking at, that scenario, and the trade doesn't actually help you financially. It would need to be a trade that you feel like that relationship and that productive 1-2 punch is no longer there, and we need to.
And this looks like a different offense with Joe Brady. I mean, that Eagles loss, I believe that was the first game after Joe Brady took over. Maybe it was the second, but either way, this team, the Bills, they run at a scheduled rush attempt 47% of snaps prior to this Kansas City game. I don't have the updated numbers, but since week 11, when Joe Brady was hired, Ken Dorsey fired, the Bills were a run-heavy team, and that's when Diggs' numbers fell off a cliff. Aside from that Eagles game when he was serviceable, where they were still kind of adjusting to the new scheme, if Joe Brady is the offensive coordinator going forward, then you have to presume this is kind of what you're going to get out of Diggs in terms of target share. Now, listen, he has to catch the ball when it hits him in the hands, like it did on the deep pass. The Bills had 0 plays of 20-plus yards in this game, and Josh Allen's scramble of 18 was their biggest gainer. But if you're the Bills and you're saying this is our offensive identity going forward, then it might be a good time to try to sell high with Diggs, because if his numbers are reflective of that post-Eagles last 7-8 weeks, his value year over year is going to erode. Yeah, Khalil Shakir was magnificent in this game. I mean, the Josh Allen had 2 completions on 10 attempts of over 5 air yards. He had 26 completions overall. The average air yards on those completions was 0.7. 0.7. He was 2 for 10 throwing the ball more than 5 yards downfield, both of which were B+ to A+ level catches for Khalil Shakir, including the touchdown over Snead, which was the first touchdown he had conceded all year. So Khalil Shakir looked more like a wide receiver 1 in this game. But that's the thing. If this is the scheme, you have enough body of work to assess. Is Joe Brady your offensive coordinator going forward? then maybe it's a good time to reevaluate who is your wide receiver one. And in a draft that has an abundance of receiving talent, maybe that's where you prioritize and presume that your defense isn't going to be as injury plagued as it was this year.
Yeah, financially, in terms of what they can do, we've mentioned how far over the cap they are. So I don't think you look to them to upgrade the defense. The offensive line, it has been a definite step forward in the solidity of that unit and what it provides Josh Allen in front of him, his allowing him to play under control more often than we've seen in the past. Perhaps he could have used two more sparks of chaos, Josh, tonight. You mentioned the downfield numbers there. Benny really digging in here. Would love to see how many drops Diggs had all season. Feel like it would be up there with MVS.
It's not quite, but it's
no, but it's spicy, and that's what we're here for. I mentioned we were going to segue on out of here. Just one more from Brad, who delivered the Khalil Shakir, there we go, nailed that, has had more receiving yards than Diggs since week 60. Prior to that, my hot take is the Panthers' two choices for head coach should be Ben Johnson or Raheem Morris.
Unfortunately, I think the Panthers are going to be the last one at the coaching buffet. The more appealing quarterback situations, the more appealing draft capital situations are going to get the prime choice of head coaches. I don't think Ben Johnson's going to be left. I was at a beautiful buffet last night, and they had these delicious crab cakes in Baltimore. Those were gone quickly. Ben Johnson is the crab cakes at the coaching buffet. He will not be remaining, I would think. Panthers dream if they get Slowick from Houston, perhaps.
Love that.
That'd be a dream for them, but I don't know if it's a dream for him, because that ownership situation and that draft capital situation in Carolina, I'm sorry, Brad, is probably the least appealing of the remaining coaching vacancies.
Talk about a tough sell. All right, that has been Take Hotline, brought to you by Macca's. A loaded, absolutely sauced up, spiced up hot take hotline. Thank you, everybody, for your suggestions, whether it was on Twitter, threads, DMs, messages, comment section. We got it all, and we appreciate all of it. A couple of familiar MVPs there and a couple of new entries that were fantastic. All right, Phil, now it's time. Look, you and me, we do love a little off season. We love free agency. We love the draft. We love the draft. Capital letters. Love the draft. Two questionable, possibly sickening tears for some of us at 3 a.m. in the morning when we will refuse to post the all 22 drive, and we're messaging.
I got some text from you at odd hours about how excited you were for Tank Dell. To your credit, so there's value in those conversations. I will.
Not all my picks are as terrible as.
I'll give credit where credit's due. You were very excited to talk day 2 wide receivers, weeks before the draft.
For every Tank Dell, there's a Tyler Scott as well. So let's not take too many victory laps. Free Tyler Scott in that Chicago Bears offense. Interesting, the little nugget that just came through there is that. Speaking of that Chicago Bears offense, is that a request was put in, Phil, for the OC job per Jeremy Fowler, ESPN's own. The Bears requested an interview with the Chargers OC, Kellen Moore, for their OC position, but LA blocked him per source. More interviewed for the Chargers head job last week, which he did. But interesting.
I think reading the tea leaves, Cliff Kingsbury potentially going there for an interview, that would be the one that would tip the hand for the draft move, would it not?
Definitely tips the hand for the draft move. Hopefully not for the actual final destination there. All right. But what we mentioned, we love draft season, and we do love draft season. Is we're going to take an off-season dip into two teams here. Two of the young storyline teams, CJ Stroud, Jordan Love, Houston Texans, Green Bay Packers, tied throughout this season's narrative, woven together. And we're going to look at a fantasy offseason for each of these teams and how we want to build each of them into the powerhouses we believe they're positioned to be in. Okay. Each of us are going to take one team. We're going to be the general manager. For the Houston Texans, you will have Phil Murphy sitting in the Nick Caserio.
Yeah.
There we go. And for the Green Bay Packers, Brian Gutekunst. That will be the role I will be taking. Two very different.
Laurie Horesh, a good egg, is Brian Gutekunst.
Thank you. For Phil, it's going to be a question more about cap space than perhaps draft mechanics. And we're going to flip that for the Packers, who have just over $7,000 in 2024 cap space per over the cap. We'll see how that changes if a Jordan Love extension comes in. But what they do have is 5 picks in the first 3 rounds, courtesy of some.
When a Jordan Love extension comes in, they are not making that mistake.
No. What they'll do is get it done early, setting a ridiculous price that then the cap-strung and cap-hit-strung Dallas Cowboys will claim patience, claim they're winning a negotiation, and end up having to beat. Anyway, enough about that silly team from North Texas. I'm going to throw it over to Houston. Pick up
We're
we're
3.5 hours down the road.
Call. Nick Caserio, aka Phil Murphy. How are you going to build these Houston Texans with what I believe is a top 5 quarterback in the NFL after his rookie season? How are you going to build them into a powerhouse?
Laz and his 9 members of the top 5 NFL quarterbacks list. But no, absolute home run for Houston in the draft last year, trading up to get Will Anderson, who produced 7 sacks, but far more pressures. His pass rush win rate amongst edge rushers was only behind Myles Garrett and Micah Parsons, if memory serves on that stat. And then, of course, CJ Stroud. He's going to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. For the Texans, they have the 3rd most cap space, $71 million. The big free agent to be questions for them, Kaimi Fairbairn, who I know missed a field goal and into the wind in Baltimore. There was weird wind mechanics in that stadium, but he only missed 1 field goal all season. Kicker isn't the most consequential position. I'm not too worried about whether or not they extend him. The real questions are Devin Singletary, Dalton Schultz, who is a very reliable outlet for CJ Stroud, Steven Nelson, Jonathan Grenard, who very quietly or not so produced 12 sacks on the edge opposite Will Anderson. I think you'll see Grenard get an extension, probably a franchise tag. He's a good candidate to tag there for the year. Nelson's 31. They can probably get away getting him on a 1-year deal. But you can see these are guys who aren't going to break the bank if they decide to extend them. The Texans have $71 million with which to play. The real question, how do they address some of their defensive issues? Even though, they only allowed 3.9 yards per attempt on runs, they were tied for 5th most red zone rush TDs allowed, and this pass defense ranked 27th in the NFL. So you're going to have guys out there like an Antoine Winfield from Tampa, a Patrick Queen, who I love from Baltimore, Chris Jones. I'm sure the Chiefs are going to do everything they can to keep him, but the Texans will be able to keep pace if they want to get an offer there and get a really substantial figure for one of the most disruptive defensive linemen in the NFL. And then you see like potentially splashy moves like a Saquon Barkley, what he could be in that offense with a CJ Stroud if they wanted to eschew the norm and go with investing in a running back in his late 20s. The real problem for Houston is they are going to lose Bobby Slowick, their offensive coordinator, who has really helped CJ Stroud come along. And what can they put in his place? Who can they hire in his place to keep this offense potentially going in the same direction? And then it comes to the draft of what are the needs for this team? I think top is probably cornerback. And then secondarily at the moment, depending on what they can do with some of these free agent acquisitions, interior offensive line and wide receiver. They're positioned very well to go after a cornerback in the draft. They possess the Cleveland Browns first-round pick by way of the Deshaun Watson trade, and their first-round pick belongs to the Arizona Cardinals. That's a good deal because it moves the Texans, I believe, 8 spots up in the draft, perhaps 7, and into the teeth of what most mocks now have as a run on corner, which is their top position. Cooper DeJean from Iowa, Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo, Kamari Lassiter from Georgia, Kalen King from Penn State, Terrion Arnold from Alabama. All of those guys are going to see go in that, 14 to 25 range in the draft, in all likelihood. And then you can explore wide receivers in the 2nd and 3rd rounds. The Texans have their own 2nd-round pick, and they have Philly's 3rd-round pick, which is actually an improvement on theirs again. So very well positioned are the Texans to go from a team that had to rally late to win a very weak AFC South to be a team that I expect to win 11 games next year if they make the right hire at OC and if they spend that $71 million on probably 2 substantial names, I would say. It's 2 bona fide Pro Bowl caliber players to beef up the defense or maybe a real sexy fantasy pick in the backfield in Barkley.
I love that you went through so many of those cornerback names because over in Green Bay, they're certainly going to be looking at that position in the draft and mentioned 5 of those picks in the top 3 rounds. So I think that makes a ton of sense. And when you look at what you outlined there for the Houston Texans, when you look at the pending free agency, some of these players are going to get tagged. Some of these players are going to find themselves locked up under franchise tags and whatnot. But when you look at some of those pieces that are out there and it will get added to, does someone like a Danielle Hunter make sense with how he's placed in his career? If you're looking to add some pass rush opposite Anderson, is that someone that you could be talking about? The $70 million is so massive. It's part of the joys of having a rookie quarterback. It's part of the joys of how that contract, even one near the top of the first round, how that allows you to be flexible and aggressive. But yeah, I certainly think adding some completeness to the secondary, adding some complementary pieces up front. We'll see what happens with Grenard.
I think Grenard at 26 is a great candidate to tag.
Yeah. And I would love to see Dalton Schultz come back, because Dalton Schultz, we've seen throughout his career, has been a very generally look. He's never been a yak monster by any stretch, but he has been a relatively quarterback friendly target. Maybe not in terms of explosive additions after the catch or EPA per play. He's not adding massive amounts to the targets that he does receive, but he does tend to find himself open and make himself available to quarterbacks, and that chemistry was there early and often with CJ Stroud, and we saw it in the playoffs as well with their deep connection as well. So I think given where they're at, and look, they are young at receiver. Tank Dell obviously getting injured down the stretch, which is tough, and Nico Collins having a breakout, but keeping those three together would be a strong starting point for the next season. I think you could also look at some more depth on the offensive line. They had to move a few pieces around with health and injury.
Scruggs getting hurt, yeah.
Yeah, for me, I mentioned, let's take a trip up to Wisconsin. Brian G here, having a look at, yes, I have $7,000 in cap space. How am I going to turn this into a powerhouse? Yes, I'm going to be expediting Jordan Love. Let's not waste any time there. We're going to get in ahead of some of these other deals. We're going to get in before Dallas does whatever they do with a certain quarterback named Rain. We're going to get in before Miami make a decision about Tua. And on the front foot, we know this is our guy. Maybe we can get a little price taken off it because, he is earlier. It's 1 year of starting time, and we had a nice little bridge contract that we worked out. It seems like the agent, the front office, we have a good thing going here. So hopefully we can keep that on track. Cornerback and safety is a massive issue there. But before we even get to that, I'm making a change at defensive coordinator. I'm sorry, yes. The Barry era is over. I'm going to look at some of these talented names that are out there. It's not been it was not a great year. It was not the trajectory we thought someone like Sean Desai would take on, but there are going to be those tier of names out there. And I'm going to look for maybe I'll look at a defensive line coach or a secondary coach that is around the league. We'll see what happens in Dallas. We'll see if Dan Quinn returns. If he doesn't, what happens to the likes of the Joe Witts of the world? Could that be someone that we look at? We're going to take a look at some fresh ideas here because we haven't been happy with how the investment at both DC and the talent we've put in there. Plenty of first-round picks, plenty of high-round picks spent on the secondary, on the defense that haven't delivered. Not too upset with our pass rush defensive line. We think there's talent there. We think they have the ability. But we think they have shown up that center of the defensive front. They're able to take some things away. So certainly saw it against Dallas, and they hardly got entirely carved up by that 49ers offense. But we are looking at the secondary. You mentioned a bunch of those cornerback names, and I don't need to repeat them. We're also going to be looking at safeties, how the safeties fall on day 1 and 2 of the draft, we shall see. But you've got the likes of the Kalen Bullock. You mentioned we've got Tyler Nubin from Minnesota, Jaden Hicks, Washington State, Cameron Kinchins from Miami. There's a few names around there. Throughout that first 2 days, we're going to be looking at safety. Mentioned the cornerbacks there. You hope that someone slides to you. Does a Cooper DeJean? Does he slide to you? Does Kool-Aid? Does Kool-Aid McKinstry? Is he there? We'll see how this all plays out. We've got
I think Kool-Aid's gone.
Yeah, I think there's so much of this draft process to play out. There's going to be combine bolters. There's going to be all sorts. But we're also going to be looking at the offensive line. And that's a big one here. Me and Phil, it's a familiar drumbeat to our show. We believe in investing in the offensive line before anything else, particularly with a young quarterback. And they are in that spot where there's a bunch of names. You've got some free agents there and playing on the interior of the offensive line, or some players who are getting towards the end of the deal. You've got Bakhtiari who doesn't practice and misses games, and you certainly need an air there. So whether it's in the first round or whether it's in the second round where you have 2 picks at 40 or later in towards the 50s, you've got the likes early of like Amarius Mims and Guyton, who have a lot of athletic upside and really impressive from the toolkit they bring. And maybe they are, if you are going to keep Bakhtiari around, maybe they are the type of players that can learn and get some seasoning. You can look throughout. You can look at interior offensive linemen, whether it's I mean, I'm not trying to power through names here, but you obviously got the center guard combination with Jackson Powers Johnson. Where does he come off the board? You've got Graham Barton from Duke, who's moving into the interior, projects to move to the interior offensive line, gives you some flexibility there. You've got Dominic Puny, you've got Cooper Beebe. There's so much there that we can work with. That Jordan Morgan, I should mention, from Arizona. There are a number of names. I don't want to bombard, but that part of the draft from the mid to late first round flowing into day 2, where we are so loaded with picks, that is a spot where I think offensive line, defensive secondary has to be the investment. We'll see about the salary cap. There's a Devondre Campbell conversation be happening. Obviously, we'll look at someone, Bakhtiari, where's the deal out? What can we do? Where's he at from a playing standpoint? But yeah, it's definitely one where we're very, very blessed to have made the moves and them to come off, that we have this draft capital, when the benefits of having a young quarterback and how we've had to take cap hits with Aaron Rodgers haven't been traditional. We haven't been able to do what a Houston Texans team will do, and that cap ramification is still being felt. We're seeing the flow-on effects, but that draft capital, we have the chance with, yes, we have our first-round pick, but on day 2 with those 4 picks, we can really dictate things. We can move around. We can feel where the runs are happening. If we want to make a move up, and in a class where you're starting to have some conversations that perhaps there's a bit of a fall-off on day 3 due to NIL, due to the super seniors and the extra eligibility, that perhaps it's not as deep a class as we've seen. Perhaps we have luck and design into the perfect situation where we have assets at the exact point of this draft class that you want to add to what we're building here, which is increasingly looking like 4+ decades of uninterrupted elite franchise quarterback play.
Yeah, it's really not fair. 15 years of Favre, 15 years of Rodgers, and then year 1 of Jordan Love feels like a seamless baton pass for the Packers.
Did you run track in high school? Did you run relays? Were you involved in the baton?
No, I was slow, man. I was slow. I played soccer, and throughout from like year 6 onward, I just kept moving further and further back until I was a goalie.
What position? That's okay. So you kept moving back. See, I played soccer too.
Yeah.
I was number 9 and would not budge from that. Wanted to wear the jersey number. Some pace out of the 2 of us, considering the fitness levels right now. We're not into body shaming or anything. I would expect it wouldn't hurt anybody for expecting that you may have been the faster of the 2. There was some pace. It was build-up pace more than instant off the line. Had to get the big legs going. A bit of a little left foot, right foot, a little bit of heading. Bit of an aerial presence, but this was also not at a very elite level. I was very lucky to play with some great friends. We had some good times, but was hardly pressing for honorary rep duties at any point. But I was pressing to wear that number 9 at all costs. All right, enough trips down memory lane.
Just quickly on your Packers point, I think there will be a hard decision made on David Bakhtiari. 13 games over 3 seasons. Old adage, best ability is availability. If they're cap pressed, since they are cap pressed, there are going to be a number of tough decisions like that. I do wonder if Bakhtiari's time in Green Bay comes to an end. Another name I'll throw out there as a potential DC candidate for Green Bay, Christian Parker of the Broncos, is a coveted DB coach, being interviewed for several vacant to be defensive back or defensive coordinator positions. Yep. Given his area of expertise, the Packers' area of need, and their likely draft angle, it wouldn't surprise me if Christian Parker had a long, hard look at Lambeau. That's all I got.
I think there's a few of those conversations, and we're not doing the Buffalo Bills per se in this section, but I think there's obviously conversations around a Von Miller, and there's still guaranteed money and dead money on there. But I wonder if teams...
That's looking expensive.
That's looking tough, and I wonder if teams look at something like, and I'm not trying to hit a familiar team here, but look at what the Cowboys did with Tyron Smith coming into this year. Very incentive laden, still had the ability to earn up to $15-16 million. Really good top, not elite left tackle money, but he delivered a second team all pro season. But there was time missed, and they came up with a solution that was very incentive based, allowed cap flexibility up front in terms of getting your cap into shape on the around March and April. But also did provide the player. And for players like a Von Miller, we'll see about David Bakhtiari. I wonder if we see increasing amounts of that and some Obviously, some flexible arrangements have already had to come into place for practice
No,
time with someone like
Laz,
Bakhtiari.
the way you put it to me was just the front office is going to give him a call and say, Vaughn, we've loved you here. Need a favor.
Need a favor.
And you take a pay cut. That's their Hail Mary to try and sort out some of these things. You mentioned the restructure for the Bills of Josh Allen. His cap hit goes up by $29 million year over year, worth every penny, but it just becomes more difficult to build around him now that that rookie contract benefit is fully in yesteryear starting next year with, as we're talking about, so many of these AFC adjacent teams to Buffalo. I know they were the 2 seed, took some Miami regression and lack of health to get there. I think Miami's going to be every bit as difficult as they were last year. The Jets project to be a tougher out, a Jets team to whom the Bills lost this year. The Texans are going to be better. The Colts project to be better. The Jags should be better. You look at all these teams that were on the cusp of the playoffs. Pittsburgh penciled them in for 9 wins. It's the tide is rising and bringing up all ships across the AFC. This loss, it's going to leave a sour taste in the mouths of the Bills Mafia, and I don't know if it's going to be any rosier by the time we get to September.
Well, we're not there yet. It's not September yet. It's not April yet. It's not even March yet. But we are inching towards February, and on that way, we have a 4-pack of matchups. You'll see down below. You can catch them all on ESPN Live. Monday, 29th of January, Chiefs at Ravens, Lions at 49ers. Phil, before we get out of here, and we've hit the hour mark, that has flown by.
Yeah.
When you think about these matchups, because it'd be remiss of us not to talk about these matchups. When you look at those 2 matchups, what's the battle that first comes to mind for you? And I'm happy to lead off here, give you a minute to ruminate, because I'm just throwing out an audible here. Yeah. But what are the matchups or what is a matchup that is most tantalizing and intriguing for you as we look at these Final Four, an absolutely deserving Final Four? I don't think there's any fat left on the bone here. There's no meat left on the bone here. This is juicy and flavorsome, and I'm ready to dig in.
So I've already mentioned my 2 quick ones for Chiefs Ravens. It's Patrick Mahomes against the Ravens pre-snap. Mahomes' ability to diagnose what the Ravens are masking, what they're trying to do to beat them before the snap, because their rush, whether it's 4 rushers, 5 or 6, is so airtight. That's one. And the other is the Chiefs' interior defensive line and those linebackers. We saw Willie Gay assigned to spy Josh Allen in that game, left injured with a neck. They were able to mitigate that, but what can like a Nick Bolton do and this interior of the Chiefs defense do against a very deep, steady Ravens run game, which just the offense at large in Baltimore may be getting Mark Andrews back into the fold. So those are the 2, the interior offensive line, the running between the tackles for Baltimore against Kansas City, and Patrick Mahomes pre-snap.
Some people like to relax in an afternoon listening to Michael Bolton. I like to relax listening to chat about Nick Bolton. Anytime we're talking Nick Bolton, you know I'm going to be in a good mood. Now, I'll speak about one of the other matchup in a sec to balance it out. I think from that Chiefs-Ravens, look what we saw early from that Houston team. They challenged with some blitzing, and Lamar eventually had answers, but we know a team that's going to be creative and throw some aggressive blitzes at you. It's that man Spags and the Kansas City Chiefs. On the Kansas City Chiefs, Joe Thuney, I believe, is getting an MRI on the injury he had today, so that'll be certainly one to watch. For me, Chiefs offensive line that seems to have found a little bit more cohesion in the last couple of weeks and a little more consistent protection and platform laying for that Chiefs offense, for Patrick Mahomes and for Andy Reid's creativity to get whirling. Flip it to the other side. In the last month or so, we talked about the NFC and the 49ers, and as the Cowboys had their struggles, as the Eagles had their struggles, as a number of NFC teams, really failed to impress as we hit. No one hit with a ton of momentum from that side, short of some of these wildcard teams. When it comes to the Detroit Lions, I do think they're the best team to challenge, and that's what I'm intrigued by. How do they challenge the 49ers from the defensive side of things? From the offense, we know they're talented up front. We know, look, they were talking about Aaron Jones. There's running game advantage to be had. Watching that 49ers defense and watching how the Packers went at them, I thought when they attack the outside, and particularly if they attack them quickly, I thought that was the best way to attack the fringes. I think using some of that aggressiveness of the 49ers defense against them, both at the defensive line and linebacker level, quick screens out wide had some effectiveness there. Some of the quick outside runs, some of the toss plays outside to Aaron Jones I thought were really interesting. So we know that the Lions, from Ben Johnson, the OC, the talent on the offensive line to the dual threat running back, saw Jahmyr Gibbs looking like Jamal Charles again. That's making me feel old, but moving on. We saw they have the ability. So how do they input that? Do they take those learnings and how do they put that into play? Challenge them there, flip it to the other side of the ball. Detroit have had their moments defensively documented throughout the season. They found some steel in the last month or so, last couple of weeks. We've seen the defense stand up and string some good series together. The biggest thing for them, look, you're not going to contain the 49ers throughout the entire contest. It's just not going to happen. But they are well coached enough. They have some standout players on the defensive line. We know with Hutchinson, what we saw with Derek Barnes, who rocketed up the Barnes power rankings with his interception, but we've seen from likes of Brian Branch, Ifeatu Melifonwu, how he has come along, younger brother standing tall there. Some of the secondary play, some of the safety play that we've had, I think they have the ability to create splash plays and steal possessions. You're not going to stop San Francisco all day long. So with that, those spot talent that they do have, run defense that has shown up, do they have the ability to steal 2 or steal 3 possessions? And I don't necessarily mean rip the ball away. I mean getting stops. Because with what they have offensively, how clever they are, how talented they are, how well coached they are, scheme they are, how well their quarterback's playing, I think they'll be able to move the ball against the 49ers. I think there's enough tape out there recently to do it. Can they do enough? Can they maintain their aggressiveness? Can they challenge enough against that San Francisco team to just steal enough plays and keep this thing equal? Because the longer this game goes along, and I honestly felt like this was the case with the Packers and the 49ers, the longer this game goes along, the more that Detroit keeps it close. I think when you talk about belief, talk about noise, not literally, it's a home game for the San Francisco. Detroit will travel for this. The Lions fans will travel. But when you talk about how the pressure will build, it will build more intensely if this game stays close on the 49ers than the Lions, who would, rather than pressure, they'll feel it, but they'll be instilled with belief that they belong here. And also they'll be instilled by the pain of their fans and what they had the chance to do for the first time in a very, very, very long time.
Laws, for me, the matchups and the questions are, if you have the opportunity when you're watching, just try and remember, just watch Aiden Hutchinson for a few snaps and just you can see what motor embodied is. But Laws, he has 12 pressures in 2 games in these playoffs, and the opponents on those 12 snaps have net -4 yards. And that's going up against a Brock Purdy who averages 8.3 yards per attempt when he's pressured this season. So for me, the question is, which defensive ends, which edge rushers get home? For Aiden Hutchinson, pressure isn't going to be enough. We saw twice in the first half of this game against Tampa, this win over Tampa. Ifeatu Melifonwu and Aiden Hutchinson both had sacks within 3 seconds. I mean, just snap there, boom, done. And then Brian Branch was just over that on one of his sacks. And some real clever blitz packages there from the Lions defense. And man, I dread their brain drain that's going to happen in the offseason. But how often does Aiden Hutchinson and any of the DBs who are blitzing opposite him get home? And then same question on the other side. Jared Goff 2 weeks ago, 22 for 22 when he wasn't pressured against the Rams. It's incumbent on Young and Bosa and that edge rushing duo that was built at the trade deadline for San Francisco for this very purpose, that the Lions are going to try and mitigate, like you said, with that quick passing game. But can Bosa and Young create enough pressures to either force Goff into an uncomfortable pocket move or get home and get sacks? That, for me, is the X factor in this game. Which edge rushers? We know pressures will be created and quarterbacks will be a little bit uncomfortable in the pocket. Who gets home? And that team, whether it's San Francisco at home or Detroit on the road, trying to punch a ticket to a Super Bowl for the first time, what a story that would be. That, to me, is the biggest question heading into this game.
1 minute till we hit 70. It's been a good stretch. It has flown by. I think the adrenaline from yesterday's action is still coursing through us. Somehow, Phil, we only have 3 games left of an NFL season. We also only have 2 weeks until we are reunited in person.
That is true. 2 weeks, I believe,
more, that's
exactly, depending on maybe a little later because I land late Pacific time. But with that in mind, Laws, 3 games remaining, the best 3 games of the season. This is when history is made. This is why we've been doing this for 20 weeks and why you've been hanging out with us for 70 minutes. Thank you all kindly for being a part of this edition of the NFL Brekkie Show. We have a few more remaining, but between now and then, keep it on ESPN.com's NFL page for all the latest NFL news leading into Conference Championship weekend when the 2 participants in this year's Super Bowl will be discovered. For Laurie Horesh, I'm Phil Murphy. Thank you for joining.